Good afternoon. Today, we are starting a new series. This series is about Buddha, the path to enlightenment. So I'm back again with Brother Mercurio and super excited about starting this series. This is going to be really interesting. We are actually going to talk about the story, how this originated, because a lot of people don't really know the story of Buddha. They always think of Buddha as, the big guy with the big belly.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
yeah, and a lot of even there's a lot of misconceptions because a lot of people think that
Mm,
if you're Buddhist that you actually worship Buddha.
right.
And yeah,
Mm,
that's not the case. I remember I got to tell
mhm,
you this funny story real quick.
mm,
I was working as a makeup artist, and at that
mm.
time I had converted to Buddhism.
Oh, right, I
Did
didn't
I
know
not
that.
tell you that? Yeah, I was Buddhist
No,
for a while.
interesting.
Yeah, so I
That's awesome.
converted. Yeah. So I converted to Buddhism and I was vegetarian because of that.
Mm,
And they had some big celebration and they had barbecue and all this other stuff upstairs. And they
mm.
were, they had made an announcement that the employees on the break could come up and get some food.
Oh,
And I was visiting the store. I was a promotional makeup artist. So
mm,
they said, you can go upstairs and you can get some food.
mm,
And I said, no, I think I'm probably just going to go ahead and go out to the food court. And they said, why? It's free. And I said, because I'm vegetarian. And so one of the girls came over to me and she said, why are you vegetarian? And I said, oh, because I'm Buddhist.
oh, right.
And and she said, you mean Buddhist, like, the big guy, she said, I'm Christian. I worship God. And I said, well, I believe in God too.
Yeah.
And she goes, no, 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 you
Mm,
worship Buddha. She goes, if you're Buddhist, you worship Buddha. And I gotta worship Buddha. And she goes, who do you worship? And I go, the same God you do.
right.
And she just kept on like arguing with me about it. Like, and I said, no,
Mm,
seriously, just because you're Buddhist means you're following a philosophy, a way of life.
yeah.
And she she just wasn't having it. She just
Oh, no.
absolutely believed that, there's a statue that I had that I would literally, like, I would worship that
Mm,
idol. It was pretty funny. So I think it's interesting to kind
yeah,
of clear that up, that, Buddhism is a, philosophy. It's a way that
yeah,
people choose to live, and we're gonna kinda talk about that story. So I'm gonna
yeah.
you wanna tell the story?
Okay, yeah, sure. But I mean, just to follow up on that, I think you're right. There's a lot of misconceptions about what Buddhism is. And it's based on colonialism in the past, I think, when the British went into India and so on, and they saw a lot of these statues and other parts of the world. And I think there was an assumption that people are worshipping that because it's a statue and it's sort of common to a lot of houses and places. But actually, the Buddhists would say, wouldn't they, that, we all have a Buddha nature. Every Buddha's different. You can be a Buddha.
Mhm.
If you actually see the Buddha, then that's a problem. If you're worshipping it, it's a problem. You're supposed to kind of use it as a way to point you to your inner enlightenment, the perfect being, or something that's happy, that's you. It's not about a separate deity that you worship, which, yeah, as you say, it's a real misconception, especially among Christians who worry about idol worship, and actually Muslims too. I think a lot of the religions that do have that issue around idol worship think it's that, and they just assume it, but it's not. So,
I
yeah.
remember going into a Buddhist temple and they would have these services. And
Mm,
this one guy, he was a monk that used to teach the services and he was really, really funny.
mm,
And I remember him telling a story about how it doesn't matter what religion you are, you can be Buddhist. And
mm.
he said that there was this woman that came in and she kept on saying that she was Christian. He goes, why are you here? And she goes, because I want to be Buddhist. And he goes, so are you going to give
Oh,
up your Christianity? And she goes, no. She goes, I am going to be the most mindful Buddhist Christian you ever met.
oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I thought that was a great story because what he
Mm,
was demonstrating was that you can follow these, philosophies or this way of life,
mm,
and according to Buddha, this is the way to enlightenment. And so we're
mm.
gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about,
Yeah,
how much
absolutely.
time we have. We'll talk about the Eightfold Path and
Yeah,
the
the aspects of Buddhism. Yeah,
the noble truths
yeah,
as
yeah.
well. So, all right. So go ahead, tell us a story.
All right, then let's do it.
Enlighten us.
So, enlighten us. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So Buddha was a human being, and there's evidence that he actually did live, and it was around the fifth and sixth century BCE. So it's before Christianity, and about 500, 600 years before. He was said to have been born in what is now Nepal. It used to be part of another kind of region in those days, many years ago. And he was probably raised in a place called Kapilavastu, which is, I think it's something else now, but it's in Nepal, basically. And his father was a guy called Suddhodana, and he was part of a clan called the Shakya clan, which, again, they run this big region in that area.
What is the Shakya clan?
I believe it was the family that he belonged to. So it was like the royal family of that region,
Mm.
essentially. They
So
were
I think that that's important because for
yeah,
people to know is that Buddha was actually a
born.
prince. Yeah, he was a prince, and he
Yeah,
was born out of royalty.
absolutely. And his mother was a princess, from another part of what is now Nepal called Devdaha. She was called Maya Devi or Maya. And what they say, there's a few legends about how Buddha was born. But one of them is that he was born from her armpit, which is quite interesting.
I think
um,
that would be impossible. That's kind of weird.
well, yeah, who knows in those days, but apparently she dreamed of an elephant the night before, a white elephant with white tusks that had entered her right side. And it was very symbolic of, spirituality. And 10 months later, the Buddha was born, so in
Wow.
10 months, interestingly. So, and he was born in what the Buddhists call Vesak, which is like on a full moon. And he was born beneath a tree in a garden in this area called Lumbini, which is now Kapilavastu, I think. And then he grew up around that whole area. He spent most of his life in that area or the north part of India. Supposedly, when he was born, he was visited by a hermit called Asita, who analyzed him. And they used to analyze them to see if they had these 32 marks, apparently. So I don't know this, how that works exactly, but there are
Hmm.
supposedly 32 marks that indicate if someone's a great leader. And so this hermit said he'll either be a great king or he'll be a religious leader. So it's quite interesting because there are other religious leaders who have a similar profile, right?
Mm.
Including Jesus. He's going to
Really?
be
I did not know that.
a great king, he's going to be a great king,
Huh.
and king of the Jews.
What you mean a similar profile
So
meaning like 32 marks or something?
no, 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 not that. But people were saying, the prediction before Jesus came, the prophecy was that there's going to be a new king for the Jews. But they
Mm.
didn't realize it was going to be a religious leader. It's going to, they just assumed it would be a revolutionary leader, didn't they? So if you look in the Bible, there are various predictions. But I don't want to go back to that because we're focusing on Buddha. So, but basically, anyway, so this wise hermit said, Buddha, this child will either be a great king or he'll be a great religious leader. And then they had other people do similar predictions, these Brahmin scholars, and there were 10 of them apparently, and they all said he'll be either one or the other. But one of them said he will actually be a religious leader, and predicted he would be famous in that way.
Really?
So lots of other things are kind of unclear about his upbringing. Some people say different things, don't they? About what happened, but he may have had a wife. So there's one story that he had a wife called Yasodhara and a son called Rahula before he left the temple, so quite young.
Mhm.
Uh, Quite a few stories say he had a spoilt life. He was a prince, so he had everything he wanted. He was protected very much in the palace. He was even a skilled martial artist and won competitions, according to one story. So he was in this perfect, ideal situation. And then what happened? What happened was one day he saw the back gate of the temple open, or another story is that he was looking out over the temple and he saw that the outside was different. And it's like, oh, I want to know what's going on outside.
Mhm.
He started to realize he'd been almost had an artificial life,
Well, what's interesting about that is that I read was that,
Mm.
they didn't ever let him see older people. Like, older people
Oh,
were banned
interesting.
from the palace. When he saw that temple gate open, he saw elderly people, he saw people that were
Mm.
sick, he saw suffering, and it was really quite confusing. When he asked about it, they would kind of, like, brush it off, like, "You're not
Yeah,
gonna
it's like, no, 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 no.
yeah, we're not
You're
supposed
not
to
going
see
to see
that."
that. Yeah. So that led him to determine to leave the palace and actually
Mhm.
see what was going on. And supposedly, the first thing he saw was an old person, as you say,
Yeah.
like old people out there. The second thing he saw was someone with a sickness and a disease, and the third thing was a dead corpse. Somebody died and funeral, and those things made him realize, wow, this is how people are in real life. People suffer, people have all these problems. So how can I fix that? How can I improve suffering? And apparently, also he saw an ascetic, like a holy man out there. So it also inspired him. He thought, okay, that guy's got something. I need to investigate what that is as well. So he went back to the palace and he was kind of ruminating on all this, and then eventually decided, right, I'm going to quit the palace. I've had enough of this. This feels like an artificial, fake life. Even though I have everything I want, I'm wealthy, I have a wife, I have all these things. That's not enough. And how many of us go through that, right? How many of us think, yeah, something about life, I need to find out more. And so he quit the palace. He cut his hair off. Apparently, he went to a forest where he'd hidden some monk's clothing, and changed into the monk clothing, so no one would recognize him. And he went to beg for alms, for food, and became a beggar. And he lived in a remote jungle forest. And apparently, the reason for that was so he would face his fears. He'd have to, stay there at night. He'd have to be surrounded by all these dangerous animals, I presume,
Mhm.
a bit like Australia where I'm living. And he had to face his fears, which is a big part of the spiritual path. At some point, everyone has
Yeah.
to face their fears, don't they, to
Mhm.
advance. And so then, once he'd done that, he went to seek out his teachers. He wanted to find someone to help him learn yoga. And this was India. In those days, ancient India had a lot of these very holy men, yogis, wise people around who were teaching. And near to him, there were two people. So the first teacher he went to was someone called Arada Kalama. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm sure someone will correct us on the podcast.
Well,
But
you're doing better than me because I'm horrible with pronunciations when it comes to foreign languages.
oh, okay, no worries. Well, anyway, this guy basically he specialized in teaching people the sphere of nothingness, which
Mm.
is a meditation technique, apparently. So Buddha learned that and mastered it, and the teacher invited him to join him and said, you're really great at this. You come and be part of my teaching team, I suppose. But Buddha said, well, there's something missing. I don't feel that's enough. And so he went to another teacher called Udraka Ramaputra, another name that I've probably messed up, but apologies to our listeners if it is. And he's specialized in a type of meditation to do with the sphere of neither perception or non-perception, which again is another aspect of this meditation. So again, the same thing happened. Buddha mastered that, and he was invited to be a teacher and so on. But he was still not satisfied. So he moved on, and he went traveling. Basically, he just walked around India, practicing different ascetic techniques, different meditation techniques. He got to the point where he stopped eating. Essentially, he was having minimal food. One story says he had 1 grain of rice a day because he
Mhm.
felt he wanted to master his body. So he learned about breath control, and a lot of Hindu teachers talk about prana and about pranayama, which is like learning that your breath can help control your mind and your spiritual state, and it can lead you to develop certain esoteric gifts. So he learned breath control, he learned mind control, but it was too extreme. He became super emaciated, like lost so much weight that he was unwell. And he realized, again, he was dissatisfied, and he said, well, actually, this is not the path. This isn't it can't be right because, you shouldn't end up in this extreme state. So he realized, and later on he talks about the middle way. So I think this is one of these formative experiences that made him realize that you can't be too extreme one way or the other. So he just he started eating again. Again, different stories about that. There was one of the stories is that there was this girl called Sujata who came up to him and gave him some rice and milk because she took pity on him and realized he was starving. He had 5 companions with him at that point, apparently, who were also doing the same practice. But when Buddha stopped, the 5 companions said, "Oh, yeah, you've given up now, we're leaving." So they went off on their own thing. And they thought he'd abandoned his quest, but he hadn't. But what he had realized is that meditation was the key to everything, which he called dhyana. And this is the path to liberation and freeing your mind. And the whole thing about Buddhism, as we'll discuss later, is it's about liberating yourself from your own suffering, but also from the wheel of birth and death, reincarnation. So at that point, he decided, okay, I'm just going to meditate. So he went to a place in India, North India, called Bodh Gaya, and he sat under the Bodhi tree. And that's, again, there are various different types of stories around that, but essentially he sat there until he became enlightened. And he may have sort of had breaks in the middle, I don't know, but in general, he sat under the Bodhi tree until he achieved enlightenment, which he did. And then he received the wisdom about the philosophies of Buddhism, which are the 4 noble truths and the middle way and the eightfold path and so on, and the 3 poisons, and we know what is nirvana and so on. That point on, he became a teacher. So he started teaching all of those things. And obviously we'll come back to those things in more detail. But and then he died I think he was 80 when he died, 79 or 80. And some people say that was due to food poisoning because he'd been a strict vegetarian and he'd eaten a piece of meat unknowingly, and that may have caused food poisoning. Other people say it was some medical illness, and he'd reached the end of his time. So apparently he just lay down and that was it. He entered parinirvana, which is like the state of death and heaven. And that's the story of Buddha.
There's a lot of stories behind him almost coming to death by starving himself to death. And I've heard a lot of different variations of that, of him choosing that because he wanted to see why did they suffer from starvation? So what does this feel like? And he was very curious in nature as far as wanting to understand things, but not wanting to understand it just by given knowledge. He wanted to understand it through experience.
Right. Yeah.
When he was meditating and he went and sat under this tree and he started to meditate, variations of the story is he would meditate for a while, get one of his truths, and then he would write it down, and then he'd come back and he would meditate again and he'd get the next one. Some variations where he sat on a tree and stayed in meditation for 5 years, so I don't know how accurate that is. That's like him being born under somebody's armpit, but
Exactly.
I don't know, but there's this, what's interesting about that is I always kind of question that, but there's, I don't know, years ago, probably about 10 years or so ago, there was a young boy who started to live with the monks, and he was so promising that they sent him up to the next level. And then he did so well in that level that they sent him up to the next level. And he kept on getting up, and he to the point to where as a very, very young boy, he was competing with the masters that were very old with what he could do. And he got to a point to where he said, I'm going to do the same thing Buddha did, is I'm going to go sit on a tree. And he didn't eat anything. He didn't drink anything. And news reporters were coming and they were filming him, and they had this whole area blocked off. And literally there was like live coverage on this 10 years ago. They called him the Buddha boy. They were filming him, like CNN was doing it. Fox News was doing it. Yeah. And they were filming him, like, and they'd say, okay, it's been 36 hours. And then they cut it for a little while and they said, okay, it's been 48 hours. It's been 72 hours. And they were like, okay, his liver's going to shut down if he doesn't eat something, he doesn't drink anything. And they were like, he's at a point to where he could die. And eventually, I think it had gotten to about like several months, and they couldn't believe this was happening. And so one of his masters, that was really old guy,
Mhm.
went and sat in front of him. And suddenly they started competing because it was very cold. And apparently they were warming themselves up, and they were doing some
Oh
sort of
yeah,
competition because
technique.
he was
Yeah.
heating up his body. The boy's clothes caught on fire. And it was on TV. It was like
Wow.
they were like, "What just happened?" You know? It's interesting. There was some theories behind that, and this is why I'm kinda going back to the thing about Buddha sitting on a tree,
Mm,
was there was theories about that you can ground yourself into the earth. You can pull from the nutrition that the
mm,
trees pull from
mm.
and survive from the energy that you get that way, just like trees do. You know,
Wow. Yeah.
I know, I don't know how accurate that
How
is,
does that work?
but
Yeah.
the Buddha boy did it for a while, so I don't know.
Well, yeah. I've in yoga, I've read. The yogis apparently can tap into earth energy, like etheric energy that they can draw from the earth, so they don't need to eat. I'd love to be able to do that. That would be so cool. Probably have a much better fitness level and stuff like that. I don't know, but
I need to go find a tree in there for a while. Okay, so let's go over, what he discovered. Now, I do have some questions. You
oh
there
yeah,
there's
that's
the 4 truths, and then there's the Eightfold Path, and can you describe the difference between the 2? Like, what is
there's a yeah. I mean, these are the key precepts of Buddhism that he started teaching to people.
Mhm,
So after he became enlightened and achieved nirvana under the tree, he um, decided he kind of spent some time formulating the way he was going to teach what he'd realized. And he did various things like built his Sangha, which is like the community of Buddhists. So he first went to the 5 people that he was friends with before and said and demonstrated that he was enlightened, and then they came back and helped him. I think 4 of them came back, 1 didn't. And then they lived in this park that one of the kings had given them. And basically, they began to have more and more people. They attracted more people into this. And he formulated the basics of Buddhism. So the first thing is the 4 Noble Truths, which are one, that we as human beings, we crave and we cling to impermanent states. We're always looking for the next exciting event in our lives, or the next bit of adrenaline or dopamine, aren't we? These are all temporary things. And this is called dukkha, and this causes suffering. Um, so that's number one. The second one is we're caught in samsara, we're caught in the illusory world. We're just caught up in it, aren't we, all the time? The third noble truth is that we can be freed from that. We can be liberated if we follow the right steps. And then number 4 is there is a way, and here are the steps. So the steps are called the Eightfold Path. So the 4
okay.
noble truths are like, this is the reality, guys. This is like we're in illusion. We live in an illusion. If we hold on to it, that's going to cause us suffering. That's basically what the 4 noble truths are saying. It's like, face it, you're suffering. That's true. We accept the fact suffering exists. And also the reason for suffering is that, the other truth is that the reason for suffering is that you're clinging onto it. You're holding on to all these illusions that keep happening that they're not going to last, but you still hold on to them. And
Mhm,
of course you suffer. Um, but the good news is there's a way out of it. So the 4 noble truths are about making that very clear. We know we suffer, we know what it is, and we found a way out.
mhm.
Um, and then this is what the way out is. So that's the 4th truth. And the way
Okay,
out is the Eightfold Path. So that's
okay.
a system. That's the system that you have to use to get yourself out of suffering and liberate yourself, really. And of course, everything comes off from that. All the different meditation techniques and all the other philosophies and so on of Buddhism. So the Eightfold Path is right view, right resolve, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi. In other words, meditate.
Concentration. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
they're all, and what he said is what right means. Everything, there's a right way to do everything. But what he means by right is the bit that actually works. It's the way that works. So if you have the right viewpoint, it means not that you're like arrogant and you're saying, "Oh, look at me, I'm right." It's just the correct way that will actually free you. You know.
And
So
what is that?
the right view is that to understand that your body and mind currently work in a corrupted way because you're in the earth and because you've been surrounded by all the influences you had from upbringing and so on. It stopped you thinking in a way that will lead to enlightenment. So the right view is to change that way of thinking. It's like cognitive behavior therapy. It's like you've got to change your thinking so that you're thinking in a way that recognizes that you can free yourself from corruption. You believe that, then that's the right way. It's that kind of thing.
It's also knowing the things that matter and which don't.
Mm,
It's kind of understanding, like being aware of your own intelligence and your emotions, but understanding that
mm,
these perceptions and stuff can be distorted through the emotions and through your mind. And
yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, that in itself that is the virus of humanity right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And we
It's
see echoes of that in other traditions, don't we? Like, there's the Kybalion, which says the all is mind. And if you perceive things in a certain way, that will cause you problems.
Mhm.
So, yeah, this echoes, even in Christianity, actually, in the Bible, there are quotes that are around the way to think and, finding your inner peace and so on.
Well,
So,
all religions have that.
right.
All of them do, and they're all teaching basically the same thing, just slightly different,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this is really interesting.
That I think when you first read this list of right things to do, you start thinking, my assumption when I first read it was, oh, yeah, this is like a value judgment. Like, how do you
Mhm,
know what's right for someone? And I'm
mhm.
guessing people in the audience might be thinking, how do you know something's the right way to do something or not? And I suppose the answer to that is that, Buddha tested it out. So he was saying, well, it's more like a formula. It's more like if you do it this way, you'll get these results, you know? So if
Mhm.
you think in this particular way, then you will achieve enlightenment, or if you speak in this particular way, you'll find yourself less likely to suffer than if you speak negatively, for example. Um,
Mhm. I
yeah.
think when it comes down to it, like, a lot of times as humans, most of us,
Mm,
we have a tendency of responding out of pain. And
yeah.
I know before I did all this work on myself, I was a
Mm,
very broken person that responded
mm,
out of pain all the time. And I think I wrote some stuff about this on Facebook, but
yeah.
it was that pain that I had. What it did was it kept me locked into other people in pain.
Mm,
And because they were, similar in nature, and so
mm,
if I was to try to be friends with somebody who wasn't in pain, then I would feel
mm,
very uncomfortable, and I did
mm,
the feeling or belief for a long time with me was that they were fake and that everybody was
mm.
uncomfortable, and I don't like fake people. And
Right, right,
or
yeah.
they're judging me, or they think they're better than me,
Mm,
or, they're the ones with the big problems. I would rather see the real problems, and that
mm,
that was the illusion I was living in. Just because I was this way, I could not see that anybody else could actually be happy.
mm.
Do you
Yeah,
see what I'm
well,
saying? Yeah, so
there's that quote, isn't there? That like, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. I
yeah,
forget who said that, but it's so true, isn't it? If you're in a particular state, you'll start seeing everyone else as the same. And it's like, actually, it's
yeah,
not true.
and it wasn't until I shifted
Mm,
that I started to believe that there was a possibility and other people could be a certain way.
yeah.
And when I started to change my behavior, my thoughts, my
Mm,
actions, and monitor and um, edit my
mm,
emotions and actions and words, even thoughts. And
mm.
when I started to do that, that's when everything started to change with me. And then
Yeah.
I started to realize that there are people out there, and I started to feel worthy of those people in my life. So now
Mm.
I have people in my life that I feel are really wonderful people, and I don't get harmed by them because they're not in pain.
Yeah.
See, that pain
Yeah.
came from the fact that,
Mhm.
hurt people, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And so if you're
Mm.
hanging out with a bunch of hurt people, you're gonna get hurt, you know?
Yeah,
And
it's a vicious cycle. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I really think that this is kind of like, the nuts and bolts of this particular thing that he's saying is that
Yeah.
you've gotta change that perception, you've gotta change
Mm.
that view, meaning you've got to look at things from a different angle.
Mm.
As long as you're looking at it from ego or
Mm.
from pain, because if
Yeah.
you're looking at it from pain, you're gonna be reactive on
Mm.
everything,
Yeah.
and then they're gonna react to you, and then,
Mm.
it turns into a shitstorm. Yeah,
Which is yeah, right. It's a state of attachment, as they would say in Buddhism. You
yeah.
just keep yourself attached to this world. And you know what I love, there's another really great teaching that they have called the three poisons, which is that all of our wrong thinking and all of our suffering really comes because we are thinking in terms of the three poisons. So these are greed, which includes things like desire, lust, like clinging onto things, wanting things all the time. Hatred, negative thinking about others and about sort of, because again, that's a kind of attachment, isn't it? Because you're so angry with someone, you can't let it go. And then ignorance, which is just lack of awareness about how to think or how to do things. And then they've identified another five poisons and then a whole 84,000 negative emotions that come from those. But what I think is amazing about that is once you understand that's what's causing your suffering, those three things, and you start to work on that, you can change it. And it
Mhm,
also, the thing I found on doing, because I was practicing that the last week just to see how it works, this understanding of the three poisons has given me a much better sense of compassion already, even just after a week of doing it, for others. Because you start to understand this is why someone's doing something. It's not because they are, inherently bad necessarily. It's because they are thinking in terms of these three poisons, and until they get out of that, they're not going to change their behavior. They'll still continue being horrible to people until they can actually liberate themselves. So it begins to make me feel a lot more compassion for the world and kind of start
mhm,
to think, oh yeah, I want to save all beings. I want to help everybody understand this, because then they can free themselves and the world will be a better place. It starts to open that up in your thinking and your heart. The more you realize that there are ways out of it. And I think that's the beautiful gift that Buddha gave the world, is that there is a way out of suffering. There's a way to understand things that will free you, make you and everyone else much happier and more effective, and
mhm.
accept their life in a different way.
This is really beautiful.
And people think, oh, that's just a sort of hippie thing, oh, you're just saying you're compassionate, but you're not really. But Buddhism says you can cultivate it, and it comes from you. It has to come from you, You have to start to create that in your heart and start developing it, and choosing to think positively, or choosing to not follow these three poisons, or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm,
You have a responsibility in this. You can't. It's not just going to happen and fall out the sky. But Buddhism does give you the tools to help you grow that and develop it. And that's what I think is the great thing about it. And that's why it fits with all religions. I don't think it matters. Coming back to our very beginning conversation, what Buddhism gives you is applicable to life. It's human. It doesn't matter what religion you are. Everyone can do this.
I'd like to kinda go into a little bit more detail on some of these, if you don't
Mm.
mind.
Let's
Um,
try.
okay, so we just kind of went over, the first one. The second one is the right intention. I think I think this is really a good one. I mean, your intention is so important as far as the quality of results that you get. So going to that, the right intention. Intention is so important because if
Mm.
you are not putting the right intention, what is the right intention? Well, just having intention in general is right. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, if you because the problem is the lack of intention. And when you decide that you're going to put that intention into it, meaning you're going to put the
Mm.
effort, the work, the discipline, the focus into it,
Mm.
then you're going to get the results. But
Yeah.
if you're just kind of going through the motions, you're
Mm.
not going to get the result.
Mm.
And think about it,
That's right.
like, just think about, like, what you and I do with the ritual work that we do.
Mm.
The difference between moving through it very quickly because we have it
Mm.
memorized versus sitting there and feeling it,
Feeling it.
going
Mm.
through the intention of drawing that energy down, feeling it inside of us,
Yeah.
there's a huge difference. And so when you do that,
Mm.
the results from it is much stronger.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
in anything we do. So if we decide, that we're gonna change our view on how we do things and how we respond to things or how we
Mm.
perceive things, then we have to have that intention, which means that we have to make that conscious effort.
Mm.
And that's really kind of what intention is. It's a conscious effort, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's being in the right state of mind. It's making the right choices. It's like it's all of actually it's everything in that eightfold path, I reckon.
Yeah, yeah. Then the next one is, the right speech. Now
Mm.
this is funny. I mean,
No
how often
swearing.
I know, I'm terrible
No,
at that.
I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily that, but
I don't think
where
it's
does that
about
come from?
swearing, but
No,
I
it's
think
not.
I think
Yeah.
swearing is, when it's a problem is when it's done with anger. If it's done, if
With
you
the
hear
wrong intent.
with the wrong intent, right? Exactly. I had that monk that I used to work with a long time ago.
Mm.
He told me, that people used to look at him with awe because of what
Mm.
he could do.
Mm.
And he said they almost saw him as godlike. But as soon as he didn't want them to see him like God, he just wanted them to see the possibilities of what
Mm.
could transform inside of themselves. They would almost like worshiping him. He said, "So you know what I
Mm.
did?" And I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "I threw in some colorful metaphors and that stopped it real quick."
Yeah, yeah, makes
Yeah,
sense.
so I've kinda, like, I take that approach sometimes because
Mm.
sometimes when I am working with people, they start, like they
Mm.
get into the idolization
Mm.
of, who you
Oh
are.
yeah. That's another samadhi, isn't it? It's another illusion. Sorry, not samadhi. Another maya. It's another illusion.
Mhm. So I've just kinda
Mm.
made it a practice to throw in a few words every so often too.
You
Well,
know
it's
who
the
would love
right
that?
intention, it's the right intention.
Absolutely, you're helping them. That's your
Yeah,
intention. Yeah,
but the
absolutely.
right speech, so let's talk about that. What do you think that means?
I suppose it's around. It's linked to intention. It's the way you are saying things to people. It's the way you're expressing yourself and your truth. And we have to be aware of our thoughts and our speech all the time. Especially if you're learning this type of path. You may find yourself saying things that are quite mean to someone, or that are going to actually hinder your progress, or be unhelpful to your karma or to your future. Look on social media. I mean, it's not verbal speech, but the way people type things and respond sometimes can be really unbelievably bad, can't it? So
Oh gosh, I know. I
it's
know.
being mindful about that.
I
How
have
you're.
to be mindful. I have to be mindful with that
Mm.
because I can really start feeling like I wanna get on a rant right now, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, because I start seeing some stuff that I just think is absolutely unbelievable, and I start getting all fired up, Like, I'm ready to get in there and do a little fight. Just because it's like,
Mm.
bad people, you're being bad. Stop this. Like you're
It's
creating
not
more problems than good.
right.
And
That's it. Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I have to be mindful too.
And
You
of
know,
course, Buddha, what we test that against is the middle way, as Buddha calls it,
mhm,
which, and what's the middle way? The middle way is another big teaching of Buddhism, which is that you don't go for the extremes, try to keep balance in the middle of things. You could be extremely kind of ascetic and avoid everything, or you could be extremely indulgent and hedonistic.
uh-huh.
But it's finding that middle path, isn't it? And the same with speech and behavior. It's like, what's the right way? It's probably the middle way. It's not going to be extreme anger or extreme passivity.
Hmm. That's exactly right. I mean, there's a right way of saying things that won't hurt somebody.
Too much
Um,
severity
yeah,
versus too much mercy, as they say
yeah,
in another
exactly.
tradition.
Yeah, I know, I know. You've gotta, like, find that middle ground of being able to say something without,
Mm,
harming somebody, because your words can cut somebody.
yeah.
And I think, what's important here that I always try to emphasize to people that I'm working with is that, when they tell me this person said this and that to them and it really hurt and they're crying and crying, I'm like, "Well, what did you say?"
Mm,
And they're like, "I was calm the whole time, and
oh
I
yeah.
said this," and I said, "Well, show me how you said it." And it sounds almost like condescending in their
Mm,
words. I mean, even that when you're trying to be calm and you're trying to say something, you're sounding very, you know, like almost like
mm,
you're better than them. I
so
always
true.
try to tell people, that when things come up like this to step away, go for a walk, get your
Mm.
emotions in check before you decide that you're gonna have a conversation.
You just hit the nail on the head there, I think, for this whole thing. It's about being in the right state when you act, isn't it? And Buddhism makes a big thing of this. It says, if you can do meditation and maintain that peaceful state that you can achieve, because if you meditate enough, you will find a state of peace in you that's like nothing else, you know?
One of the things that I learned when I was a Buddhist was walking meditation.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And so when I feel like somebody's kinda rattled my feathers a little bit,
Mm,
I'll literally just go outside and walk. One of the things that he had me focus on is think about whether which comes first, the right or the left foot. Which
mm,
one's leading?
interesting.
And so I would focus on that and I couldn't figure it out, you know? And
Yeah.
I was like, I don't have an answer. And I got so like wrapped up in that thought. And then later on, as I practiced this a little bit more, I just focused on my feet, just
Mm,
focusing on the my feet hitting the ground. And that it's so calming
mm,
to bring yourself into a very intentional action, which is the next one, by the way, the right action. And, you know,
mm,
what do you think that means?
Well,
How
I guess.
to the right action, because an action is something you actually do.
Mm,
So, like,
it's a
if
re-
you think about like what do we do that causes us problems?
well, I would say that comes from thinking. What's your
Mhm.
thinking before it? What's your state of mind? Because
Mhm.
as we just said, like if you're in a very angry state, you will act a certain way. If you're in a very avoidant state, or I don't know, you're inebriated or something, you're drunk, you'll act in a certain way. So it's being aware of what your state of mind is first, I think, before you do something. Like you say, take time out, go for a walk, do something to calm that inner mind, and you'll probably come back and you'll do the right action. But if you don't do that, you may act out of emotion or out of an extreme situation that doesn't actually help you in the long run or the other person. So yeah, I believe it's about action based on inner awareness and calmness versus action based on a very kind of emotional state or a reactive state. Would you
Mm,
agree?
yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think
Mm,
our actions really, define our character too. And
very
I
true.
I find that, there was this show I was watching, reality shows,
Oh
and
yeah.
this girl Married at First Sight. Yeah, it was Married at First
Mm,
Sight. And this one particular girl, as soon as she saw the guy that she was supposed to marry that they set her up with, she absolutely decided he's not her type as soon as she saw him.
mm,
He was a good-looking guy, it's just she liked cowboys and, a certain type of look or whatever. And she was,
mm,
like, acting like a total you know what through the whole show, and
mm,
in the background, the film crew was following her around, and she's like, I hate him and blah blah blah. And then she come back and she's like, I'm a really good person. I'm a really good person. And she was constantly saying how she was a good person, but her actions were not showing.
Mm,
That's kind of the point, because this is something I hear from clients too, is that I'm
mm,
really a good person. And
mm.
I'm like, okay, but maybe you are as your soul, but your actions are not
Yeah.
showing that you're a good person.
Right. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
you know, how do we act in the toughest situations? And
Mm.
that's really a test of your character
Oh
when
yeah.
you're being challenged, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's not easy. This is why you have to learn meditation, because then it trains you so that when you are in that situation, you're ready. You can deal with it.
Oh,
But
I've been tested on this particular subject recently by the universe.
oh,
Yeah, this
right.
has been I've gone through this a couple of times, like, it was my next level up lesson, I guess you wanna call
Mm,
it, and where someone would come at me in a way, that was hurtful,
mm,
or just in a way that really kind of set me in a, "Oh my god, what just happened here?"
mm.
Why are you doing this? I actually had a long conversation with my proctor about it,
Oh yeah.
and she was like, this is not about you, this is their issue, and the universe is going to test you again, it's going to show back up again. Okay, and so the way that you respond to this is going to
Mm,
be, whether or not this lesson keeps on coming at you, or whether or not it simply goes away. So I recognized I responded appropriately in this situation, but it showed up again. And the next time I knew exactly how to handle it. Like, I had, my cues, like, I was like,
mm,
I'm going to be very intentional, because I
mm,
know that this person is dealing with their own alchemy, their own issues, that they're
right.
going through, that they have to work through, and it's not about me.
Yeah, I understand.
And yeah, I had to respond. I had to really be intentional there, really think about, like, make
Mm,
sure I was presenting, like, change the view. That was the very first thing I had to do. So it's interesting that we're going through this, because these are the steps that I took. I had to
mm,
change how I viewed this situation first.
mm, mm.
And
This-
I mean, you want to go, how can this person hurt me like this? How can
yeah.
this person, I have never given this person any clue
Mm,
that I would even think or feel or behave in such a manner. Why would you think this way of me?
absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it still happened. And so I had to change my view about that.
Mm, But isn't
And
it great you could change your view? Some people can't change their view. So
well,
something.
but I think a lot of it is because you and I
Mm,
were on this path. We are on a path to enlightenment, right? And so we're working
mm.
at it. And so it's like every single thing at life is this lesson. It's this one big school
Yeah.
that you're constantly, it's like, once you
Mm.
get this and you're like, oh, the angels are singing
Exactly.
and you're humming and vibrating, and then,
Yeah, it all happens. Yeah.
and it's like, whoa, next level up. The lessons get harder, they get more
But
intense.
isn't
Yeah.
that weird? It's like you think you've resolved the lesson, and then something else happens, and you get another level, and then that happens, and then you kind of go up at yet another level, and it's like this is never ending.
It's never ending. It's
But it's
exactly
beautiful.
right. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, but it's hard, because,
mm,
I am a reactive person,
mm.
and so I've had to learn not to be a reactive person
Well, yeah,
to
and that's the human state, isn't it? Most of us grow up being reactive, and this is what he's saying. The whole point of Buddhism is like,
right. That's
this is
why I
how
love
to
it,
change it.
because I'm sitting here going, "Oh my god, these are some of the things that I've had to apply, and I didn't even know?"
Right.
Yeah, it's
Mm,
been a long time since I've practiced Buddhism, so I've totally forgot. Okay, the next one is
yeah.
livelihood,
Right.
and
Mm.
This is basically about like how the type of work you do. Is that
Yeah, I would say the way you live your life too, maybe. You
correct?
know, so if you have a business, you're not doing it to exploit others. You might,
Mhm.
or you maybe are choosing actions in your life that are going to help the world and improve things, or you're working in an organization that perhaps is more compassionate about the way it does things. I don't know, or you can try and contribute to that. But again, it's a choice, and it comes probably from an inner state of peace, isn't it, or an inner mental state that allows you then, or gives you the motivation to make those choices
Mm.
and live your
Well,
life a
yeah,
particular way.
yeah. To not live in a or take on a career that's kind of parasitic or,
Mm,
where you're cheating or stealing or pushing or, you
mm.
know, a person. Um, I think sales
Oh,
can be that way sometimes.
right.
Sales industry. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then there's, I don't know, like if you choose a career where like I mean, you've chosen a really good career where you're helping people, you're
Mm.
helping them with their health and
Well, and that's actually helped my development a lot, I think, to do that. Because when you help another person, it's a two-way thing. I think someone like Carl Jung or Freud or someone said that, that whenever you have an interaction with a client, you both learn. It's not
Mhm,
just, because I think when you're a therapist first, you go in and you're thinking, oh, I'm the great therapist, I'm going to cure you. But that's not how it is. It's like all those clients that you come across are probably representing part of yourself. I mean, this is going a bit deep, I guess, but
mhm,
representing parts of yourself that you haven't resolved, perhaps. So
mhm,
if you do work with them and help them with their issues, it'll help you as well. It's like a sort of two-way effect. So, and Buddhism, there, this is another whole podcast probably, but they have a very specific approach to medicine and healing that's based on this and these philosophies, which will be wonderful. We'll go into that another time, but
yeah, so the next one is the right effort. I
what are
think
those?
I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I mean,
Mm,
what kind of effort are you actually putting into the relationships you have, into the
mm,
jobs you have, into the friendships, into your workout program, into your eating habits, all of that kind of stuff,
all
like
those
that
things.
kind of effort. Yeah, all
Mm,
um your little things that we do. And we live in a society where primarily most people are eating fast food and that kind of stuff.
mm,
And this isn't a criticism towards any of that. It's just that if you do want to make some kind of change in a relationship or your physical
mm,
body or your
mm,
spirituality, a lot of people say, I want to learn how to meditate. I've tried a few times, but it didn't
mm.
work. Well,
Yeah.
you don't try a few times, and
Yeah.
meditation is something you make a commitment to and you do
Mm,
on a regular basis, and you get better at it as
mm.
you know, go forward.
Well, right.
That would
That's
be
it.
the effort, that's the effort. Like, if you're gonna
Mm,
do a full body transformation, you've got to put the effort of showing up to the gym.
Well, this is a very important point because I think today there's a lot of people who like the quick fix. They want a tablet or they want a rapid solution that, oh yeah, let's go and do liposuction because I can have my body right within a day or something. Or let's go and I can't deal with my anxiety, so I'm going to take Valium or something that becomes addictive and then causes more problems. But if you learn to meditate, as you say, it requires effort. It requires you to actually put the effort in to get that habit going, and you will see results. But you won't see results if you just think it's going to work over in 5 days or something. So that's probably it with right effort, isn't it? It's like that type of thing, as you say.
Well,
Yeah.
it that's so true. I mean, if you're just gonna try it for a little while, life isn't supposed to be treated like it's it's like a buffet
Mm.
where you're just kinda tasting
Yeah.
and here and there.
But I think what it is people don't want to take responsibility for themselves. They would rather have something external do it for them, and then they don't have to worry about being responsible for their own body or their life or their way of thinking or whatever. Because to change that does take effort, and it
Well,
takes
that
time.
effort is discipline, basically.
Yeah.
And, I've been
Mm.
posting a lot on Facebook about this particular subject, as you know,
Yeah.
that people will come to me all the time saying, "I just have no motivation to do this. Why don't I have the motivation to do this? I think I have a block." And I'm like, "There is no freaking block, okay?"
Yeah, I liked your
It's a
post about that. That was great.
subconscious block. It's like they've heard this so many times, like on
Mm,
Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever, a subconscious block. This is a choice that you choose. You're either gonna be a robot, running
mm,
patterns and doing the same thing exactly the same way every single day, or you're
mm,
gonna break that pattern and you're gonna get
mm.
up and you're gonna do something different.
Though I do have to say, working in mental health, as I do or have, that sometimes it's based on trauma, why people won't make a change because it's
Mhm.
too painful for them to change, So, but then that again requires a kind of effort because then you can go, make an effort to go and make an appointment, see a counselor of some type, or talk to a friend or someone you trust, because I know counselors are expensive. It's not always possible. But, you can find a way usually to start to address things
Mhm.
in you that will then allow you to have that effort, motivation.
Well,
So,
and I get that, and
or
I
a
have
hypnotist.
to obviously, yeah, I'm also a therapist as well, and so
Yeah.
I do realize that trauma can stop people, but what I
Mm,
try to
mm,
explain to them is you can let the trauma control you, or you can control the trauma. You can make that effort yourself and get up
mm,
and do things. Like I have a client currently that just taking a bath and washing her
mm.
hair is an effort.
Yeah.
And so we take these baby steps, and she's accountable to making sure she eats and brushes her
Um,
teeth and, does this thing. She's making that effort. And people tend to find a reason why they can't make that effort and
mm,
the reason why they can.
yeah.
Because the second that she met somebody that was important to her, she started making that effort. It became more important to her.
How many people do that?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really a common thing, isn't it?
There was no reason for her, and I kept on telling her, "The biggest problem you have is you're not getting out and
Mm,
having a reason to live,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
you need to
that's
do
right.
that." And so I started saying, "You need to get out, just get out, start meeting people."
Mm,
And
mm,
then that desire to wanna do some of these things will start to come,
mm, yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it's true.
And
Very true. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, so the next one is mindfulness.
Right, mindfulness. Yeah, what is mindfulness then? To me, it's like the state of mind you're in, isn't it? It's being aware. It's a kind of present awareness.
Yeah, it's about being in the present. I think
That's
that's the hardest one most people can't do. They are either
mm.
locked in the past or worried about the future.
Yes, that's so true. Yeah, and in the West, we're like that. We don't have a concept of mindfulness, really, do we? Unless you learn
Mhm.
something like this. But you can be. That's exactly it. You're stuck in the present, or sorry, stuck in the past or the future, rather than here and now, which is
I
what's happening. You know.
I did this, when I first met, Shane.
Mm,
Um, he was always talking about how his head is always spiraling and thinking and overthinking and
mm,
worried about something that's already in the past, or worrying
mm,
too much about how these other people might be thinking, and it was
mm.
either past or present. Okay, I mean past or future.
Right.
And I said, so I gave him an exercise that I read in a book that was written by a Buddhist master. and I said, go do this exercise. And this is just when we were friends, because we were friends
Mm,
first. And so I said, go do this exercise and tell me how it works. So I told him, go buy
mm.
an apple and go buy an orange. Just one
Oh yeah.
apple, one orange. And he said, okay. And I said, now first take the orange. I want you to smell it. I want you to
Mm,
focus only on the smell. Just inhale it. And then
mm,
take it and start peeling it, and focus on peeling it a certain way. like
Awesome.
very slowly, very intentionally
Mm.
focusing on, and then eat it, and then just let it sit on your tongue and taste it. So then I said, and as soon as you're finished, I want you to set the peelings aside, throw them in the trash. Do not think about that. Pick up the apple and intentionally get out a peeler and start peeling it very slowly, a specific way. Like if you
Mm.
want to like peel it around in one smooth, like thing, or, shaving it like some people do. Take that, smell it, cut it, put it in your mouth, chew it, taste it. Be very, very
Mm.
focused only on the taste of that. And then
Absolutely.
when you're done, I want you to just put it all aside, put the core away, the peelings away, and then
Mm.
sit down and just think about what you experienced with the the orange and only that.
Mm.
Revisit it, and then immediately like that, shift to the experience you have with the apple. Because if you can learn how to shift a thought just like that,
Mm.
stay very focused on that thing,
Mhm.
present. He was like, "You changed my life." He's
Wow.
it was the funniest thing, He's, and, with this job that he does right now, he has to be extremely present. It's interesting because if you can just do this little exercise, you can literally,
Mm.
like, learn how to be
Mm.
100% present. Present means you're reading a book to your child, and you're not thinking about what you're cooking for dinner.
Mm. Or checking your phone or whatever you do.
Yeah, and that's hard, because we're constantly doing 2 or 3
Mm.
things at a time, you
Actually,
know?
that's a very good point. Like when you're interacting with a person, do
Mhm,
you focus on that interaction fully or not? And many often, I mean, I still find it. Sometimes I find my thoughts drifting because of something they've said or something else I've seen. But actually, lately I consciously, well, not lately, for the last few years, I try and keep my focus back on that person, and it is more meaningful. You have a much better conversation, I think. If you're aware of
mhm.
what they're saying and what their body language and so on, they feel listened to then as well, which I think is important. So
Well,
it's sort of mindfulness. Yeah.
I think that if you're looking at them, then it's easier to listen.
Mm,
Um,
mm, true.
when my kids were little, I used to, when I was telling them something is important, I would make them look
Mm,
at me in the eyes, and I'd say,
mm.
"Look at me," and then, they'd dart their eyes or dart
Yeah,
their head down, and I'm
as
like,
kids
"Look
do.
at me in the eyes. I wanna see your eyes make
Yeah.
contact with my
Mm,
eyes." And then
yeah.
I would say it very clearly because I didn't yell at my kids. I was just like,
Right, right.
"You will not do this again, and if you do this again, you will be in your room and you're gonna be grounded.
Mm, right.
Do you understand?" "Mhm." Now repeat back exactly what I said, and, and sometimes, like, my daughter, she would repeat it back in a way that
Mm,
she didn't understand, and I'd
mm,
say, "No, that's not what I said."
mm, mm,
And I said, "Try again." You
mm.
know? And
Yeah, yeah. Well,
and,
you're quite a good mum. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was, I've got some really funny stories about that because, sh
Mm,
I forced her to learn how to think and
mm.
process things, and I'd say, "Okay, if you can't figure
Wow.
this out, go sit in your room until you can figure out what I was trying to
Oh,
say."
that's great. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
she'd come back and, "Mommy, I know what I did wrong." And I'd say, "Okay, what did you do?" "I made you mad." "No, you didn't make me mad. Go back in your
Mm,
room and think about what
yeah.
you did."
That's not it. Yeah,
"Not
exactly.
it. Do it again, do it again."
Right, right.
Eventually,
Yeah.
she got really good, and
Mm,
I would say I would get frustrated with her, you know, and because she was challenging, and I'd say, "Go to
mm,
your room." She'd go in her room, she'd stand there for, like, a minute or 2 minutes, she'd come back, and she'd be all, like, tears wiped off.
mm,
"Mommy, I thought about what I did, and I did this, 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 and this, and I'm sorry." You know? And I'd be like,
wow.
"Ho" she learned very quickly to
Mm,
process, you know, as
yeah.
opposed to, and that's the thing about being
Mm,
mindful is about
mm,
really, when you're listening And what's funny about it as adults, like if they have either one of them, either one of my kids, if they have something
Mm.
important and you're not listening, they'll say, "Look at me in the eyes."
They say kids learn what they live, don't they? Mm,
Especially my daughter Amanda, she'll say,
awesome.
"Look at me in the eyes. Look
Mm.
at me in the eyes when I'm speaking."
You get it back.
I
Full
know,
measure.
I know, I know, I know, I know. It's funny. It's funny what happens when you
Oh,
teach your kids. You see them mimicking and parroting you. So it's like
so
really
much.
important that you do things the right way. Okay, so then the
Mm.
last one is concentration.
Oh, okay. Which I guess is, I've also seen it written as right samadhi, or being meditative awareness, being in a state of awareness. So it's, again, I think it's that thing that we talked about earlier, that trying to keep yourself in a constant state of awareness and mindfulness, and that kind of inner peace you get from meditation. That's
Mhm.
what I see as like a samadhi experience, which
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
achieve through mindfulness, can't you? You know, if you practice mindfulness meditation or vipassana or whatever you call it, there's different terms for it. You can get to the point where you feel this incredible inner peace, and if you can keep in that state, you'll make the right decisions. You know, you'll have the right awareness anyway. So it just, you can train your brain a bit like you trained your daughter. You can train yourself to be in that state all the time, and then, you know, in a sense, nothing can touch you really. Staying
Mhm.
in it is difficult. You know, it's hard to stay in that state, but with practice you can. So
Yeah, with practice, it's like even still to this day, I've been doing this for what,
mm,
30 years or more. And I'm a very practiced meditator.
mm,
I've
mm,
been doing this for a really long time, or probably skilled is probably a better word. And sometimes I still find that my mind wants to drift. And sometimes I have some really good days where it's really easy for
mm,
me, and other days it's harder. And I'm like, "Mm-mm, go back,
mm.
start all over again, start all over again," because my mind wants to
Yeah.
drift over here and start thinking about some odd thing that happened like years ago. Like, why am I even thinking about that? Go back, focus
Mm.
on nothingness. You know, it's,
Well, yeah. Just, but as they say, you almost have to let those thoughts happen and just drift past like bubbles, you know, going past, and then come back to your state of calm. And there's a great technique, you may have done this with, called compassion meditation. Have you, you know, where you think of three people that you feel differently about? Shall we do that live? Because we could, that might be quite useful
actually, it's a
for
great idea. Let's
people
do it.
listening. Yeah. So the the first, you know, you get yourself into a fairly relaxed state and take a few deep breaths and just, you know, feel like you're fairly calm. You know, no distractions. And then the first thing is to think about someone you really like, someone you feel good about. You know, like your kid or your, you know, your partner or someone in your life that you love and you care about. And then visualize your heart center, and see light coming from your heart towards that person. You know, feel love towards that person, and almost see it like a light from your heart, that love going to them, and unconditionally just give it to them. That's it. And then when you finish, let them have that love without any, you don't want nothing back, you don't want anything in return. Just give that love to them. And then once you've done that, come back to your state of relaxation and think about someone you don't know so well. You know, maybe a coworker or someone you've met that you know don't really know, but there are, you know, you don't have any issues with them really. But and then cultivate that same feeling in your heart that you gave to your loved one, and then send that out to that stranger. You know, just send it out to them without any want for return. Just like visualize the light from your heart going to that person, and then let go. That's it. Gone. It's gone to them. Fine. You carry on your life. And then you're back to your meditative state. And this is the last stage. The third stage is to think of someone you don't like, or that you had an argument with, or you dislike. And you know what I'm going to say? Cultivate that same feeling in your heart. And people find this difficult. I do understand that, but you've got to almost suspend all belief at that point and visualize the same light and the same love going from your heart to that person. Send it to them, and then let it go, and that's it. Don't think about it anymore. Just that's gone. Finished. You sent it. Carry on your life. And 9 times out of 10, you'll find that person's changed. I guarantee it. You may not even see how they've changed, but they will have done. However, that's compassion meditation, and what I find it does for people, I don't know if you found this, it helps people detach. It's like it stops you being attached to that, whoever that is that you're thinking about, and you realize you're the one that's in charge of what you want to give to people. Like if
I think what's interesting about what you said is what you're actually teaching somebody is emotional transference.
Interesting.
And, we do that in a negative way very easily. Like we had a bad relationship and that person treated us bad and certain things trigger us. So then we transfer that emotion onto somebody else, or they get in the fire zone just because you're in a bad mood and you bail out at that person to take it out on them. It's that emotional transference. Basically, you're teaching somebody how to do the opposite. I teach something very, very similar to what you're talking about, what you said. But I actually have them imagine a picture of a person or an event in their life where they felt a certain way. And I have them play it out like a movie. And then I ask them to feel it with as much feeling as they can.
That
And
sounds
then
good.
and then I take another emotion that's positive and I ask them to take that picture and just take a snapshot of it and just move it over to the right side. And then I ask them to another feeling, like maybe one was happiness, another one is peacefulness, a peaceful time in your life. And I just start going through all these positive emotions and play the movie, feel the feeling, push it to the right. And then I start asking them to move. I start compounding happiness with peace. Feel happiness, now feel peace. Put the picture up, like the picture's here, and now the picture's this picture, and now this picture, now this picture. And it's like, feel happiness, feel peace, feel happiness, feel peace. And then I ask them to feel it on top of each other, feel happiness and peace at the same time. But I'm using other like accomplishment, some other different positive emotions. And then I compound it and call it empowerment. And then so they've got all these positive emotions they're feeling in us. They're going, feel it, intensify it, make it stronger, make it stronger, make it
Wow.
stronger. And then once they do that, then I say, okay, now take that picture of the person that you hate so much or that event that happened that hurt you so badly. Put that in front of you while you hold that feeling.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
so.
It's almost identical to what you're saying. It's just slightly different. And then I say, open your eyes. They open their eyes and I say, how do you feel about that situation? And every single time they say, it seems like it doesn't even matter.
Wow. You
Every
see, that's the
time.
power of the mind, isn't it?
Yeah. And this is an exercise over, when people tell me they have no control over it, and I go, okay, let's do this exercise. I'll show you how much
Yeah.
control you have.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, because people don't realize the control comes from here. It's not.
Mhm.
It's not about the external factor, isn't it? And it takes a long time for people to shift from that external locus of control, as they call it in psychology, to an internal locus of control, which is where you
Mhm.
have command over your life. We do. We just don't
Mhm.
realize it. And
It's so true. And that's the thing that I try to do, because I'm very like proactive with the work I do. So it's like,
mm,
I'm not here to sit and listen to your problems. That's not my goal. My goal is to
yeah.
change how you perceive about these things and start having you act in a different way
Mm,
and behave in a different way, live in
mm,
a different way, feel in a different way, all those
mm,
things, and move them into a different insight so
mm,
that they feel that empowerment within their life that they can achieve whatever it is that
mm,
they want to achieve.
mm,
And so just by learning that you know you have the power, and I take them through all these different exercises
mm.
where they focus on this, do this, showing them they can do it. Because if somebody's sitting here
Yeah.
going, don't take your mind off of this. Just think about this.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. You're guiding
I
them.
mean,
You're
I've had some difficult clients where I've literally had to, like, they're like, I just can't do it. And I'm like, okay,
mm.
I'd pull up a YouTube video of a beach and the water flowing or something, and I go, focus on this. Just watch it for a little while. And they're like, finally, they got an image of that. And I said, okay,
Mm,
now that it's imprinted in your mind, now think about it.
yes.
And it's sometimes people have a hard time pulling up that because they're so trapped in their
Mm.
rhythms and their patterns.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
There's a great a quote that is attributed to the Buddha. I don't know if he said it,
Mhm.
but that resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And I love that because it's what we're talking about. It's it's your resentment. You're the one drinking the poison. It's not the other person doesn't care. Really, or they don't know. They might not even be aware that you're upset with them. But you're holding all this resentment, and you're like, it's causing negative chemicals to be made in your brain, and it's actually starting to affect your physiology and probably your immune system. But the other
Mhm.
person has nothing to do with that. And when you start to realize that, that's often a good thing to help people change their thinking, because they start realizing, oh, yeah, what I think actually has an impact on my physiology.
Wow. I mean, I think what you're saying is so amazing. I mean, I love this. And just reviewing some of these things, it just has made me realize that these are the steps that I take. I didn't realize it until I was going through it. I'm like, wow, those are the steps that I take. I mean, because ultimately we're all human. Okay. All of us. And we
Yeah.
all have our faults. We all have our emotions. We all have our impressions of how we think about certain things or
Mm,
perceptions. And enlightenment is literally by taking control and altering that
mm,
to a way where you're not suffering. And the whole point behind Buddhism is to not suffer.
mm. Yeah, to liberate yourself from
Right.
that.
So the bottom line is with Buddhism, and just really kind of like wrap it up in a bow, is
Mm.
that if you do this, this makes you suffer, so don't do it.
Basically.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
those things make you suffer, so don't do it. And
And isn't it beautiful to realize that there's a solution? There's a
Mhm.
way out of this. That I don't think any other religion, even if they contain that in their teaching, if they don't make it so clear and explicit that this is the way to do it. That's
Yeah.
what I think is beautiful with Buddhism. So no one's worshipping a Buddha. You're following his teaching, and his intention was never to be worshipped. I
Mhm.
think his intention was to teach people a way to get out of their own suffering and improve the world, which it does. Problems in the world, including the wars, including all the big things that happen, they originate with these three poisons.
Mhm.
These three ways of thinking that humans have that actually lead in a chain reaction to something big. And if they could just catch it early on, it wouldn't do that. So
This has been amazing conversation. We have a
as
lot
always,
more. Yeah, we have a lot more to discuss about Buddhism. There's all different types of Buddhism. You were talking about like the magical part of it or the
yeah, I mean, we'll talk about a couple of the masters that applied some of these principles, but they had magical results. I mean, some of the things they were doing incredible. But we'll tell the audience that was used by a saint called Milarepa, and it's
Mhm.
the same technique to increase your body heat. And he used to walk around naked in the snow, So we'll talk about that. And then there's another couple of things where Buddhas can fly. They could move very fast. There's another saint that was very specifically focused on a way to become enlightened within one life. So yeah, we'll talk about those, and that'll help.
Yeah,
That'll help everyone
yeah.
understand it more. Yeah,
I think
be
it's
really
going to be
cool.
it's going to be some very exciting more podcasts that we're doing. So I hope you guys
Yeah.
enjoyed this and remember the 8 steps and apply it to your life. You'll find more peace. We'll see you later.
See you later. Thank you.